Time for the World Politics Show. And of course, I've got two amazing regular folks with me that I'll be bringing on very shortly and everything, that being Sasha Starr and Rick Rosner. But President Donald Trump on Thursday signed executive actions that delay for nearly 1 month tariffs on all products from Mexico and Canada that are covered by the USMCA Free Trade Treaty, a significant walkback of the administration's signature economic plan that rattled markets, business, and consumers, according to CNN Business. So this executive actions follow a discussion Trump held Thursday with Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum and negotiations between Canadian and Trump administration officials. After speaking with President Claudia Sheinbaum of Mexico, I've agreed that Mexico will not be required to pay tariffs on anything that falls under the USMCA agreement, Trump wrote on Truth Social Thursday after a phone conversation with the Mexican president. He said the tariffs would be delayed until April 2nd. The USMCA is the United States and Mexico Canada agreement negotiated by Trump during his first term that makes the three North American countries a free trade zone. He said, I did this as an accommodation and out of respect for President Sheinbaum. Our relationship has been a very good one, and we are working hard together on the border, both in terms of stopping illegal aliens from entering the United States and likewise stopping fentanyl, Trump added. Thank you to President Sheinbaum for your hard work and cooperation. Sheinbaum, in a post on X, thanks to U.S. President Donald Trump for a respectful discussion about the tariffs he imposes. Sheinbaum said that virtually all of Mexico's trade with the United States is included in the U.S.-Mexico-Canada agreement. So there was another quote that said, practically all the trade we have with the United States is within the Mexico-United States-Canada agreement. There's a part that has to do with the rules of origin, but everything is practically within the trade agreement, Sheinbaum said at a news conference on Thursday. However, a White House official on a call with the press added some nuance to that argument. About 50% of imports from Mexico and 36% of imports from Canada are covered under the agreement, the official said, but many more items, such as avocados, are generally not covered because of the high cost of compliance. However, those items that technically are not in compliance with USMCA have in effect been treated at customs as if they were or they weren't subject to tariffs. So it looks like there's some pullback from some of that tariff conversation and all along those lines. So I want to bring in Rick Rosner and see what he's got to say about that, because he's over there in California, which I know has got a lot of items that are traded with Mexico and all along those lines. And I'll bring in Sasha Starr and we'll see what he's got to say about this as well. And we'll get to some other political news as well. But what is our thoughts? It looks like there is delays at least 4 months.
Comment, and then I'll let Sasha, who's more of an expert than I am. Trump is a deeply stupid man, and tariffs were a stupid idea that caused the Great Depression in 1929, when that was the last time that Republicans controlled the Supreme Court, the presidency, the House, and the Senate. Sasha?
I want to read you something very interesting that just came to my attention just an hour ago. To analyze properly really what's happening on the borders, you have to have the relevant data. For example, let's talk about migrants, irregular entry in 2024 from Canada to the US, 18,644, so 18,500, let's put it this way. From Mexico to United States, 2 million. And from US to Canada, 28,000. So from Canada to US, 18,500. From US to Canada, 28,000. However, the 2 million from Mexico to US beats everything what you just mentioned. Let's go to fentanyl. seized in 2024 from Canada to the US 43 pounds, 43. From Mexico to the US 21,148 pounds. And from US to Canada 882 pounds, so 20 times as much as from Canada to US. And finally, illegal guns. From Canada to the US, 3,000. From Mexico to the US, 16,000. And from US to Canada, 30,000, which is 10 times more than from Canada to the US. Well, if you have these numbers, then I would like to understand what is the reason for this war, tariffs war, where all countries are complying with the treaty which was signed by Trump himself in his first cadence. So that shows that Trump, he is not respecting the law. He's acting on his whims. He understands that he's immune inside the country because he holds Congress and Senate and the judicial Supreme Court, and outside of the United States because of the military might and other factors, whatever. So he feels like absolutely superpower man inside the country, outside the country. Nothing can touch him. He can do anything what he wants whatsoever.
Yeah, sounds like his attitude is very much that, and all along those lines. I had heard a report yesterday that, and it's probably part of the reason that he was praising Sean Baum, is that she had already started to clamp down heavily, because there was actually a report. It was on one of the major networks, and they showed the border, and there was a whole lot less crossings than they had been months ago and everything. So they were saying that a lot of that wasn't necessarily the U.S. clamping down, but it was actually the Mexican government that had done a lot of clamping down in terms of people coming across the border and all along those lines. So it does seem like they have clamped down both on the drugs coming across as well as the people coming across. So that's on their side. And I think that was one of the reasons that she got elected, when she said she was going to do some of that as well. So we'll see if this all plays out, and hopefully she'll continue to do a good job in that respect. Hey, Rick, one of the other things that was in the news that's politically oriented and everything was the White House on Thursday pulled the expected signing of the executive order to dismantle the Department of Education, because there had been this notice, there had even been a draft of an executive order calling on Education Secretary Linda McMahon to facilitate a basically department closure by taking all the necessary steps that folks had said, and that was reported to a number of networks and everything. But it looks like they might be pulling back. So I know that they're not big fans of the education department, but part of it is I guess they're trying to figure out how they're going to deal with school lunch programs and even other such things if they're going to go on a state basis, which I know you talked about on the World Edition show earlier today. So what is our thoughts about this notion that maybe they're going to pull back on this idea of closing down the Department of Education?
I mean, it's a dumb idea to close down the department. You can reform it, but you don't. I mean, if you leave it up to the states, some states like Minnesota and probably half of the states in the country want to give kids free lunches and breakfast. So every kid gets fed, because it's one of the cheapest ways to ensure positive educational outcomes. That well-fed kids do better in school, and it costs like $6 per kid per day. It's cheap compared to a lot of other things. And then, but some states want to show that they're tough, and some mostly red states, and they will deny, free lunches to kids. And so if you get rid of the Department of Ed, you get wildly divergent treatment of schools depending on whether your state is run by assholes or not.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Your state was actually in the news as well because apparently Gavin Newsom, and I know we talk about this issue quite a bit, but he split with the Democrats on transgender athletes and everything like that. So I think he was saying that certain things are deeply unfair and everything like that. But it seems like he is having a split, and maybe this is part of his
So
effort to go into the middle in order to have his
Newsom's
presidential.
Newsom's not stupid, and he hasn't announced for the presidency in 28, but he's definitely looking at it. If things come together for him, I think he'll be a candidate, and he might be at this point. He would be the Democrats' best candidate because he's tall, he's got good hair, he hasn't done a terrible job of running California. We've had surpluses some years. Now the Republican, and he's smart not to announce yet because the Republicans will be targeting whoever announces. So yeah, and
And
it's
apparently
smart
what
for
he
him
said
to.
is
So the trans issue, I mean, it sucks for trans athletes and trans people in general, but that affects 1% of the population. And if he has to like say some bullshit about moving to the center about trans in order to not get walloped in the 28 election, then he's making that calculation.
the calculated move and everything.
I spent the last 2 hours looking at a trans issue because it's freaking ridiculous. So at the State of the Union, Trump had some special guests.
Right.
He had a 13-year-old kid recovering from brain cancer. He made that kid an honorary Secret Service agent.
Right.
He had a 19-year-old woman, Peyton McNabb, who claims she suffered brain damage in a volleyball game when she was hit in the head with a spike from a transgender player.
Yeah.
And then the Democrats didn't applaud any of these people. There were several of these, more of these. And the Democrats said they didn't applaud the cancer kid because Trump is actually cutting cancer research. And they didn't want to give credit to Trump. Cancer research saved this kid. But but they didn't want to give Trump credit for that since he's actually working against it.
Yeah, and one of the things that Governor Newsom said, by the way, on this issue, he suggested this week that the participation of transgender athletes in women's sports was deeply unfair, and the comments by Mr. Newsom, who has backed LGBTQ causes for decades and is one of the first American elected officials to officiate a same-sex wedding, represented a remarkable break from other top Democrats on the issue. So like I said, it does seem like he's trying to maybe move to the middle in order to make himself more palatable to some of the moderates and the conservatives and all along those lines.
And he figures he figures correctly that even though it's a shitty move, it doesn't affect that many people. That we keep talking about, there were only 9 or 10 transgender NCAA athletes out of 50,000 last time they did a count. Yeah. So one athlete in 5,000 is trans, and half of those athletes suck and aren't even competitive, aren't a danger to anybody competing in the sport. But anyway, I looked at the clip and looked at the comments of Peyton McNabb getting hit with the volleyball. Mm-hmm. And so the Daily Mail, a British newspaper, said the ball was traveling at 70 miles an hour, far faster than most people could spike a volleyball. Right. Well, I slowed down the video. I watched it 20 times and then I slowed it down, watched it frame by frame. The ball is moving at 41 miles an hour, which I'm sure half the people on any girls' varsity volleyball team, high school, college, could hit a ball at 40 miles per hour. So it wasn't unusually fast because it was hit by a biological male playing as a female.
And the other thing that came out of the Trump speech, several things came out of it, but I would love to hear your thoughts as well as Sasha's, and I see that Kim's in the background and everything. There is a House Democrat that actually got censored because he had a outburst. So Representative Al Green had that outburst during the Trump speech, and he got censored early today. And 10 Democrats joined with the Republicans in order to censor him for that outburst and everything. So exactly what does a censure do? Because I've heard the term.
I'm not sure it does anything. Maybe if you get censored more than once, maybe there are actual penalties, but I don't think a censure actually does. I don't think he gets fined or anything. But I'll Google it when I'm done talking, and I'll look it up.
Yeah,
But I want to go back to the volleyball thing, because
Yes,
it's
please.
a thing where Newsom was interviewed by Charlie Kirk, who's head of Turning Point USA, a group for young Republicans. And Newsom is not afraid to meet up with conservative interviewers. He went on Hannity,
Right.
and he does okay. And when he talked with Charlie Kirk, he said, how do we do what you guys are doing? That you guys flood the zone with messaging all the time. And Charlie Kirk agreed with him. And it happened with Volleyball Girl, where they're flooding the zone, that this girl got severe brain damage and paralysis, and it was because a man hit a ball in her face. And if you look at the actual, like I said, you look at the footage, it wasn't that hard to hit. And she claims that her sports career ended, but then if you look on the internet, she continued to play some sports. And it's all just messaging claiming a savage hit. And that is when, and all the right-wing sources just hit you with that again and again. And the Democrats were cruel not to applaud her bravery in coming to the State of the Union thing. Just a ton of messaging. And the Democrats are bad at countering the flood of messaging, even when the message is nonsensical.
Well, speaking of messages that may be sensible or not sensible, and I know that Kim was in the background. I know she's a advocate for cancer research and all along those lines. But Trump said that childhood cancer rates have risen 40% since 1975. I'm not sure if that is actual factual. If that's just something that he is putting out there as part of his.
I can talk to this because cancer detection has increased since 1975. Because now you can get ultrasound, you can get a CT scan, you can get an MRI, and they will catch it. It used to be they didn't catch kidney tumors until you started pissing blood, by which point you were in trouble.
Right.
It's too late.
But now more than half of kidney tumors are mine. I'm a hypochondriac. I'm like, let's just take a look inside me. And then they were like, well, you have a kidney tumor, a little kidney tumor. They caught it, I hope, early enough. It didn't cause any symptoms. It wasn't very big. And more than half of kidney tumors are caught before they cause symptoms, when they're looking for something else or just doing a general checkup. And so I would guess that is the case for, at least some childhood cancers. I don't know. I mean, maybe not, because with the childhood cancer, you're going to, I don't know. But I do it. I know that counts with autism, that like 1 kid in 3 dozen is diagnosed as being on the spectrum, or they call it something else now. But
we had an autism kid on the online dinner party.
Let me finish my sentence.
Go ahead.
When I was a kid, 0 kids were diagnosed with autism. It wasn't a diagnosis back then. So I would say that, yes, some childhood cancers have probably increased, but detection is better too.
Yeah, that makes sense. And by the way, we had an autism kid. He was one of the guests on the online dinner party yesterday. He has his own podcast called Autism Rocks, and he basically had this notion that he didn't want people to feel pity for him, and all along those lines, that he didn't really necessarily need sympathy, and that he could handle himself, and all along those lines. He was very much a advocate both for himself but also for the community in general, and had a very positive attitude about what he has been faced with, and all along those lines. Hey, Kim, I don't know if you saw this, but the Trump administration, how long has he been in office now?
45 days or so.
Well, he's already been hit with over 100 lawsuits since inauguration. So he's already been hit with 100 lawsuits. So we've got 100 lawsuits, and we're 45 days into the administration. How many lawsuits is Trump going to have by the time these 4 years ends and everything? Because he's already got over 100.
Trump lives and dies by lawsuits.
Yeah,
in his career,
I mean, that's his victimization.
In his career, he's been involved in at least 4,900 lawsuits. Now, most of them were people would come to his casinos and they'd run a tab, and then they'd lose thousands of bucks, and then he'd take them to court to sue them to get them to pay up. So 3,000 of those lawsuits were him suing bad gamblers. But 2,000 of those lawsuits were people suing him because he didn't pay them for jobs they did for him. Or he would say, he'd make a deal. He'd say, you do the contracting, you do the drywall on five floors of my building, and I'll pay you $120,000 for your drywall work. Then you get done, you go to him, he's like, nah, I'm not going to pay it. And then you sue him, and then he countersues, and he says, you know what? I can afford to keep you in court for 5 years, and it'll cost you 3 times as much as you were going to get paid for the drywalling. I'll pay you 40 grand, and you'll be happy to take it. And then you talk to your lawyer, and your lawyer says, he's right. He's got you by the balls. Take the 40 grand. And that's how he works.
Yeah, that makes sense, and that's the way he operates. Speaking of the way that people operate, and this is something I know, Sasha,
I do want to mention something that I heard today. One of the budget cuts that they wanted to do, I think it was to some foreign aid, and it was like ridiculous amount of money. It was huge, and come to find out, it was money to pay for people who had already done the work. This isn't like work that should be done down the road and the money was out, let's allocate money for work down the road. This was money that had to go to pay people who'd already done the work. Well, guess what? This is Trump's, way of work, because he filed bankruptcy all the time. So he got out of paying people for what they gave him for their products and services.
It's his MO. If you add together all the bills and legitimate, debts that Trump and family have skipped out on over Trump's lifetime, it adds up to about $1.5 billion. He and the Trump family are America's biggest deadbeats.
Yeah. So let me ask you this. Apparently Doge found, millions of dollars that they claim that the Clintons stole from the government to pay for their daughter and give their daughter money and pay for her wedding. Do you believe any of that?
Not really, because when you're president, and in Hillary's case, Secretary of State, if you've held high government office, in Biden's case, vice president, when you leave office, you can rake in millions, sometimes tens of millions of bucks legitimately by writing books and giving speeches. So Biden was VP. He leaves office in 2016. In the 4 years after that, he and his wife, giving speeches and writing books, raked in $8 million.
Yeah.
When the Clintons left office in 2001, they were broke because they'd been sued over, Lewinsky and Whitewater, and they had a ton of legal bills. They had zero assets. Within 5 years, they had something like $50 million from getting paid to give speeches and write books. Mm-hmm. And you can say that, well, that's bullshit that people would get paid that much, but they do if you're an ex-president, and if you're getting paid that much, why would you steal frickin' money?
Well,
when
speaking of stealing money and
One
all
more
I
that,
thing,
agree
one more
with
thing.
you, and Mark agreed with you. I agree with you.
One more
Why?
thing, like
Right.
Biden had an economic a life and economic strategy the whole time he was in the Senate and was the VP. He would buy houses for himself and his family, and he'd extend himself. He'd buy a house that was too much money for him, and he'd struggle to pay it off. But since he had a steady job, by the time he was done, he would get in the Senate, he was getting paid $174,000 a year, which is decent money plus benefits. I think as VP it was 200 grand a year. And so by the time he was left office after 8 years as VP, I think he had 3 houses for himself and his family. And then he made $8 million writing books, making speeches. Why would a guy with 3 houses and $8 million get involved in any hinky bullshit to pull in like $100 grand bribe from China or Ukraine or something?
Or Russia, or
yeah, none of it makes any sense and
So
everything.
I
Let's
wanted
figure-
to make note that the foreign aid amount that they wanted to cut that was shot down finally was over $2 billion that people have already done the work. Think about that. These people have already worked, and Elon and Trump said they don't deserve the money, even though they've already done the work.
Yeah,
That's just wrong. That's wrong.
That's very wrong and everything. Along those same lines.
That's the kind of people we're doing business with.
But speaking along those same lines, I'd love to hear Sasha's thoughts around this and everything. What is your thoughts around, and anybody can jump in, around sanctuary cities? Because I know that I think Durham might be a sanctuary city. I'm not 100% sure of that, but I know that Boston, Chicago, Denver, and New York City are on there. And apparently yesterday, the Democratic mayors got some heated pushback from the House Republicans because they claimed that those cities are harboring dangerous immigrants and violating immigration laws as so-called sanctuary cities. So, and I know that the various mayors, it's Michelle Wu in Boston, Brandon Johnson in Chicago, Mike Johnson in Denver, one of your areas, Rick, and everything, and Eric Adams in New York City. So are these sanctuary cities real, and are they problematic for what's going on with our immigrants?
I've already said that King Donald Trump will decide which are sanctuary cities and which are not, and if we need sanctuary city or not. Why are we discussing anything that Trump is going to do the way he wants? He has immunity, he has Senate, he has House, he has judiciary. What really you want to say? I would like to pay more attention to a very nice post today. There was a picture of Monica Lewinsky and the text. Unfortunately, Zelensky has no clue how to behave with the president in the Oval Office. That is much more interesting than whatever sanctuary city you're discussing.
Well, there was also apparently a lovely picture of Ivanka Trump, and people have been talking about that on social media because I guess that she was in a seductive pose, for lack of a better term. So maybe that's what we'll start talking about is the looks of some of the Trump family, because I did see that in social media where people, I guess, were either praising or being negative on the pose that she had and everything like that. So maybe we're going to
let's talk about this idiot, this piece of shit. And I'll tell you, I couldn't predict that the result of the election on November 5th will be so crucial for US and many countries around the world. However, situation is now very clean. Trump is in Putin's pocket. He is doing for Putin more than Putin can do for himself. When he opens his bloody mouth and he starts to do all the Putin's propaganda, Putin himself could never do anything as well as what Trump does for him. So Europeans now understand that. They understand that it's a new time until Trump will be thrown out of the White House or lose next election or whatever. It doesn't matter what. Europe has to defend itself. So today was a very big meeting in Brussels. Zelensky was there. There is a proposed a new organization which will be established early next week, which will include all countries that have means and desire to protect Europe and therefore Ukraine as well. So there will be a new army created, and that will change the whole the configuration of his world politics, because what Trump is doing is creating triumvirate of himself, Putin, and Emperor Xi. That's what Trump wants. He doesn't need democracy. In fact, he's trying with his little dogs like J.D. Vance and who else is there? Elon Musk, and so on. They're trying to defeat democracies around the world, including Europe. And you understand that very well. This is the purpose of Trump. Forget about Ukraine or this or the Oval Office and all that stuff. This is absolutely irrelevant. His goal is to defeat democracy. And if he will do, Europe is only one place where democracy still exists. It's not nowhere in Russia. It's nowhere in China. It's nowhere in United States. So if these three countries will rule the world, there is no place for democracy. So even if it's still there in Europe, it has to be defeated. That's what Trump is doing.
I want to go back to messaging. Kristi Noem, the head of Homeland Security at this, has been putting ads on the government has been spending millions of dollars to put out TV ads where she comes on. She's very pretty. She's had a lot of work done, Botox and filler. And she says, illegal immigrants, look out, we're coming for you. Mm-hmm. And I don't see any competing messaging from Democrats. Democrats could put up ads with people saying, I voted for Trump. I've been doing good job working for the government for 20 years and I got fired for no reason. And here's the service I did before I was fired. And, I helped veterans get benefits that they deserved. I got fired for no reason. Where is that messaging? Why do the Democrats suck ass at messaging? It's the same thing with sanctuary cities. The Republicans grab the term and they say, well, you're shielding MS-13 or Mexican gangs, murderers, rapists. Well, no, why don't you put people on camera saying, I've been here for 12 years. I own a Mexican restaurant. My family lives here. I'm beloved by the community, and I'm losing everything. And then you have some of the customers saying, we love, Mr. Ramirez's restaurant, and he's a valuable part of the community. And when you talk about getting rid of illegals, we didn't think it would be him. Where's the frickin' messaging?
Yep. Where is the messaging? I mean, there's so much going on, and I think a lot of it is smoke screens to get people riled up so that they're not paying attention to probably, I hate saying this, guys, worser things than you would ever imagine. So I would say, while all this is going on, keep looking for other things that could be going behind the scenes, not just things that you see on a surface that is common to everyone, but you guys are smart. You look and see what's going on, because there's other, I will promise you, there's some really wicked evil that is going on, that all of this is being used to cover up so they can continue doing what they're doing. I do want to bring up the first execution in South Carolina, which is to happen tomorrow. I do and don't believe in execution, but okay, Sasha, I just want to say something in his defense. One, nobody ever took into effect at the time of the crime that he was not of sound mind for many reasons. One, he had a mental illness that he was diagnosed for, and he had been very jacked up on cocaine and other street drugs when he did the horrific crime that he did, unfortunately, out of passion of love. It was, a passion of love crime. But he's already been in prison over 25 years. Why do we execute him now? He has converted. He has been a perfect citizen in the state. He's probably gotten the mental health he needed. Why kill him after 25 years?
I'll tell you that his death, which will happen sooner or later anyway, if
Tomorrow.
he's not going to be executed tomorrow, well, if he's not going to be executed tomorrow for some miracle, so he'll die in 3 years, maybe 5 years. I don't think that he will live for long. So his death tomorrow is rather of philosophical nature rather than, look, his life is not worth anything.
No.
This is, I mean, it's a kind of creature which is still alive, but will be dead if not tomorrow, in 3 years or 5 years time. So what makes a difference? At least if you're philosophically talking about that the God gave the life, God will take the life, that's one story. Now, if you will throw it away and say, well, it just happened, okay, he broke the law, and this and so on, okay, if it's not right, then appeal, go to Supreme Court, so you will live for another couple of years or so on. So, I mean, it's so irrelevant, really, to what we are discussing here, one way or another.
It is and it isn't, because we have a reform system. Maybe. And you would think that if somebody has reformed after 25 years, the consideration would be there. They haven't executed him in 25 years. Why did they execute him right then? He never appealed, ever. He said, I did the crime. Probably 25 years ago, he was more agreeing, yeah, I'm mentally crazy, just kill me. Now he's had mental health. Now
Kim, two things. One, it comes back to your favorite topic, which is planes and everything. I'll get to that in a minute, because there was an incident, ironically, I was talking to a friend of mine that lives in this city of Houston. But, there was a person that was convicted of a crime. I think it was almost, correct me if I'm wrong, Rick, but it was probably 45 years ago. It was like in the mid 70s. But he got pardoned by Biden and everything. Some people think that he was guilty of the crime. Other people think that he was totally innocent. But that was the Indian activist Leonard Peltier and everything like that. So that he was pardoned several years after having spent that many years in prison. And like Sasha was saying, those are years that he'll never get back. Just like I think the MOVE person in Philadelphia, I think that he was either being pardoned or being looked at being pardoned and everything, but those folks will never get their lives back, no matter how innocent they were or weren't. And of course, there's all those cases of like people that are found through DNA to have been innocent, but then spent 25, 30, 40 years in prison.
I know. I used to do research on that. Go ahead.
We have a new moral dilemma coming in the next 10 years. Now, Elon Musk and other companies are working on chips that go in your head. That if you're paralyzed, they let you, operate machinery just by thinking about it. But they're going to come up with all sorts of new uses for chips. And one thing they'll eventually come up with is they'll be able to take bad people who do bad things and chip their heads and make them incapable of doing bad stuff. There was a famous movie.
Lobotomy.
It's kind of like that. A famous movie from 40 years ago called A Clockwork Orange.
I remember that movie.
And there's a lot of science fiction. Like, what do you do when somebody is a mass murderer who's a crazy, mean asshole, and you can put a chip in their head and all of a sudden they're fixed? You put the nice person that they've become in prison for the rest of their life? It's a completely weird moral dilemma.
It could be a moral dilemma. Hey, Rick, along those same lines, and that's where I was going to go in everything. And it's not so much political, but it is political to some degree, because there's not enough people, as Kim has said, that are monitoring our planes and all along those lines. And there was an incident, I think it was earlier today, where a woman basically strip teased because he was upset, and she stripped on the plane and then tried to get into the cockpit and all along those lines. And she was flying on Southwest out of Houston. So I think you're heading in that way for a major conference, Kim, and everything. But apparently she earlier today tried to do this incident. They did say that she had some mental situation, so they took her away and carted her away probably to some sort of mental institution and everything like that. But I can only imagine, because there's kids and adults on those planes. Some people may have been, I don't know what the women look like. They might have been cheering or jeering, or some people may have been traumatized by it.
No, it's terrifying. Like, even if she was good looking and she was getting naked, you don't want anybody acting crazy on a plane, because at one moment they may be taking off their shirt, at the next they may be trying to open up a door. So
Or when
they said you were trying to open up the door into the cockpit.
So I think so many people are taking so many of these, happy drugs like gummies that I hear everyone talk about, and they go, oh, they're safe, but they're buying them from friends that make them from friends. And I think that there's a lot of crap being taken, and people are mentally snapping in, short. And maybe she was nervous about getting on the plane. She popped a gummy and she went crazy. And I think that that's the problem. I think, everywhere I go now, everywhere I smell pot. It makes me sick. It's the most disgusting smell to me in the world. It literally gives me a migraine. And in fact, I went to the doctors the other day, and they go, why are you getting headaches all the time? And I didn't think about it until I was driving somewhere, and I had to go get medication for it, because this stuff makes me nauseous just to smell it. But I could be driving down the road with my windows up, and I can smell it at the stoplight.
No, I know they're actually going to stop
their cars.
Yeah, I know in Germany they're going to stop the. What's the other thing that people do a lot? Vaping. I think that they're going to stop vaping.
Well, they're vaping that Delta, which in Virginia it's legal, but it's not legal, people. It's not legal to do it and drive. It's just as bad as drinking and drive. And the reason why they still banned pot and stuff like that in North Carolina is they couldn't separate the difference between the stuff that that you should be allowed to take or not. So they just banned it all together. But
yeah, you can just really quickly, because I want to pivot really quickly.
The airplanes are dangerous.
I want to pivot really quickly back to politics. So this is actually for Sasha and everything.
Politics, yeah.
There is Romania apparently foiled a revolution of a pro-Russian group, and apparently it's one of the generals that is not exactly a spring chicken and everything, but Romania detained suspects in a Russian-linked treason case featuring a 101-year-old retired general house that was raided as well. So I just wondered, because I know you follow a lot of the news around this area, if you've heard anything about this and everything and what was going on, because they said they arrested 6 over Vlad the Impaler pro-Russian treason plot. So I guess that they're trying to overthrow Romania's government with some pro-Russian people, but that's what it sounds like. But I don't follow it as much as you do. So I was wondering what you've heard about this case.
They do it, and not only in Romania. They're very active in almost all European countries. Right now, Europe, democracy of Europe is the mortal enemy for both Russia and United States. And they want to defeat and absolutely eradicate European democracy. And they're both working very effectively. Look at their trip. Look at the speech of J.D. Vance in Europe a couple of weeks ago. Look at what Trump is doing with Zelensky and trying to. He's not making any peace in Ukraine, by the way. Well, what he has to deliver is to Putin the Ukraine which will capitulate or already capitulated to Putin. That's what Trump has to do, whether he wants it or not, but look like he wants really. So this is really what's happening. That's what's happening a week ago on Friday with this horrible fiasco. And the Zelensky did very clever thing. He said that he regrets that it happened or so on, but he never apologized because there is no apology required from him. He never done anything for which he has to apologize. So right now, Trump is, with all his bravado, he is still empty-handed. He is a great peacemaker. He wants to get Nobel Prize and so on, but he cannot make any peace between Russia and Ukraine. Nothing. He is still where he was 3 months ago. Nothing. So all his policies, all his bravado, nothing, zero. Go to his North Korean dictator Kim Jong-un or somebody else.
And
So
Putin
I want
apparently
to go
said that.
back.
Putin apparently said that earlier today.
Hold on. I want to go back to people acting crazy on planes.
Yeah.
All of us are old enough to have been on planes in the 1970s, and people used to behave more. And there's a couple reasons. One is in 1978, the airlines were deregulated.
Mhm.
The feds used to have their fingers all in prices, and it used to be expensive to take a plane flight. And in the 60s, the 50s, into the 70s, people would dress in nice clothes. They would wear business suits to fly. And then starting in 78, prices started dropping, and to the point where, I've taken some plane flights for $19. And so yahoos can get on planes. Nobody dresses up, and people, and it allows plane flights are cheap enough for crazy people to get on board.
They're definitely cheap enough, and it's I learned when I went down to Miami to the same conference that Kim was at, that there is not a lot of people that are flying, so the plane flights are not as full, because they definitely made a point of saying that the planes were not full and that you could sit anywhere you wanted them to, spread out, because they were nowhere near occupied. They were probably, I think the biggest one might have been 45 or 50% occupied, but oftentimes they weren't. And Sasha, I'm sure you're going to talk about it on tomorrow, because it is what the show is all about. But apparently earlier today, Putin says any Ukraine peace deal must ensure Russia's security, and he's vowing no retreats. So he's saying that they won't give away their lands, which I'm assuming he's thinking about Crimea and the land that they have gotten from Ukraine during this horrible war. But that's just my guess and everything. So it sounds like he is putting his foot down as well. So am I misreading that?
You're talking about Putin. He is a liar through his teeth, second only to Donald Trump. Okay, so to comment on whatever he's saying or writing or so on, it's a lie after lie and after lie, and there's no reason even to listen. In the reality, why Trump is in such a hurry to make some kind of peace or so on, because Russia is losing on the line of fire. Russia is losing. They haven't moved ahead even a single meter in Ukraine. All what they're doing now, they are annihilating Ukrainian cities, killing civilians. Trump, on purpose, he stopped sharing the electronic data, so Ukrainians are now have very difficult time to defend their civilians, and they're being killed by dozens every single day. That's what's really happening. That's what but Trump is immune. He has been selected as a president by American people. He has Senate, he has a House, and he has judicial, the Supreme Court. So he will do anything what he wants. So the Democrats, you're asking why Democrats are not protesting? Where is the Newsom? Why he didn't make any comments in last few days? Why? Because of fear. Because Trump can trigger assassination of any Democrats who will criticize him and doing, and people are scared for their lives, for their families, and they are quiet, they are in fear 100%. And this is unfortunately situation today is United States. Most people are just fear for their life, for their families, and so on.
That makes sense.
A second person in New Mexico now has died of measles. There are about 170 officially diagnosed cases in the country. This is the most in 30 years. And this article here says, look out for spring breakers coming to Texas. And the one thing, well, Texas is working now to get more people vaccinated, but if spring breakers take measles back home with them, it'll be tough. The one thing that might save us from a spring break measles epidemic is that it's on the east coast of Texas that most spring break stuff happens, and the measles is happening in West Texas.
Yeah, but it doesn't take much to spread it. It doesn't take much to spread. So,
and
it's
spring break
going to be, it could easily spread.
Yeah.
I think if they don't get on it fast enough, it could spread. You know, the blessing is we're mixed enough that a lot of people who might be in that mix in Texas have had the vaccination. The problem is a lot of young people have not, and it's due to what's his face's name, Robert Kennedy, Mr. Anti-Vaxxer. They even said that before Robert Kennedy got on his rampage of anti-vaccine and convincing people not to, he vaccinated all his kids, and we never before that, and I think you even said this too, Rick, but I've heard it like 5 or 6 times, that before he got on this rampage, we never had a spread. We never had a measles spread.
Yeah, I mean, we may be saved because, you know, spring breakers are 18 to 25 years old. And so
but wasn't
gotten vaccinated.
Wasn't there a spike because of spring break during the COVID pandemic and everything? Because I remember correctly, there was a spike because of the spring breakers going to Florida and not wanting to follow
that was
rules and regulations.
Plus, there was a bunch of spread from Sturgis motorcycle rally where 100,000 bikers went to South Dakota maybe 250,000, I don't know, a ton of bikers gather in South Dakota every year.
Yeah, I remember the spurge from the bikers. I thought there was one with the other folks as well. Kim, you'll love this. There's a new conspiracy theory that Trump denied and all along those lines, but people were watching the speech and they saw him talking to the Supreme Court justice and everything. And some people were thinking that he was thanking the Supreme Court justice for giving him that immunity that Sasha alluded to earlier and everything. But he says that he was thanking him for just kind of like inaugurating him and for the standard protocol stuff that goes on in the White House. But the conspiracy theory that's out there on social media is that he was thanking the person, that he was thanking it for the immunity.
No, I mean, I think it's the immunity.
But a surprise on the court that's been building for a couple of years at least is that Amy Coney Barrett is actually a pretty even-handed justice. She's bad on abortion because of her religious background, but when it comes to other stuff, and that's one of the nice surprises over the centuries of the Supreme Court, that you can appoint a justice because you think you know their politics, and they surprise you by being less of a political dickhead than you had hoped.
Right? Yeah, they're not always the political people that you expect and everything. Sasha has mentioned a couple of times, and I know we're winding down and everything, this notion. So I'd love to hear y'all's thoughts around this, because I'm going to mention a African nation, South Sudan, and everything that is going through some problems. And apparently the arrest of one of their leaders, they're saying violated the peace deal that was out there and everything. So Sasha has said several times that the 3 leaders, that being China, the United States under Trump, and Russia, are going to divide the world. You know, they'll divide Asia, they'll divide Africa, they'll divide all of these places and everything along those lines. So is he on to something, Rick and Kim, or what is our thought?
Answer first. Go ahead, Rick. Go ahead.
Sorry, I was sticking around over on my other computer. Sorry.
Okay. Well, I'll take a crack at it. Yeah, I think you're on to something. I think that I think the reason why, Trump is always said that once you elect me in, you won't ever have to vote again. I think all of those little things, it's all there that he's going to become king, if not already a king. And, he will get his section. That's why he's saying, I want this piece and I want that piece. I think they've already spoke with each other. And I think that you're going to see certain heads, and they are going to, divide the world into certain sections. And you have this and I have this. And I think, the smaller countries are going to take a hit. And we're going to need more leaders like Zelensky and like like Trudeau. But honestly, I believe that I don't know. Okay, I'm not going to go there. I don't know how they're going to divide it or who's involved. I can guess.
Okay.
Putin.
Well, hold on a second.
Sure,
Speaking of,
Sasha.
speaking
Sure.
of dividing, because I'm definitely going to throw it to you, Sasha. I was going to throw it to you, Sasha, because apparently 20 countries have said that they want to join this coalition that is the Ukraine coalition. So that was reported earlier today as well. So about an hour ago, there were 20 countries that,
Wow.
I guess, including the UK and several that are European, that want to join the Ukraine coalition. So
That's
we
a
won't
lot
let
of
that go.
countries.
We'll see confirmation early next week when the Macron is hosting the all chief of staffs of European armies, which are ready to fight and defend Ukraine. So we'll see how it works. I'm quite optimistic about that. What I'm
I am
not optimistic is that as long as you wait for 4 years of Trump, then there will be an election, something happen. I can tell you today that Trump will go for the second and third and fourth term if he still
Well,
gonna
they
do.
already voted to.
You know,
They started to vote.
Yeah. I'll tell you how it's done. The constitution, to change constitution, you need 75% of votes.
Right. They've
So
already started.
imagine that Proud Boys and all those organizations, they will go on the streets of Washington and demand that everyone, not 75%, 99.5% will vote for change of constitution, allowing the Trump to rule as long as he's alive. And if you are against it, forget about your life and your family and so on. We will take care of you. That's what's going to happen, and soon. So be
But
prepared.
except that Trump is bad at stuff. Trump, even 45 days into his presidency, he's tried a bunch of stuff, and some of it has failed.
Doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. He can do and fail at everything what he's doing. As long as he has immunity, he has Senate, he has House, he has judiciary. There is nothing, unfortunately, you can do in this
but
situation.
he only has
Only
the
people
margin.
on the streets. That's the only decision what you have to make. Is it worse for you to risk your personal freedom, maybe even life, your parents, your families, to go on the streets to protest? That remains to be seen.
Also, in the House, he's only got a margin of 2 or 3 votes.
Doesn't matter.
Yeah, it gets
Doesn't
real tight in the house and everything. Hey, Rick, I know we
All
only
it
got
would
another
take-
minute.
Now,
Go ahead.
so in the past, in the history of the U.S., John Kennedy wrote a book when he was a senator called Profiles in Courage,
Right.
which was about senators who had the courage to stand up against their party and do the right thing. Now, we haven't had one of those senators in a long time, but it could, if Trump gets shitty enough, it could happen. We had, well, Kinzinger, a representative, and Liz Cheney, a representative. They stood up. They're not, and if we had 2 more people who were Republicans in Congress who decide to be heroes for the country, if they do some polling and see that they would be viewed as saviors by switching from the Republicans to the Democrats, all it takes is 2 people to do that. And they won't do it now, and they won't do it 6 months from now, because things won't be as bad enough for that to happen. But if things
will
get
be.
really crappy sometime in 2026, or it could happen.
It's going to be really, really bad in 2 months. But I
It's
want to
gonna get
address
bad in 2
something that
months.
Sasha just said. Sasha, you're dead on about some things. But Trump said he could go to Times Square, stand in Times Square and shoot and kill everyone, and people would still love him and still vote for him. He said this as loud and arrogant as ever. Now, you know what I heard today? I heard exactly the same thing coming from the Republican radio station, who I really shouldn't listen to, but I do, so I understand how they're brainwashing everyone. Do you know how they're all talking now? I can't be censored. They can't get rid of me. They will not take me off the radio because the people will not allow it. I can say anything I want, like constitutional boobs. If I want to say that woman has constitutional boobs, and I did it but he'd already said it, but he goes, nobody will take me down. Why? Because people love me. Now you're starting to hear everyone have the Trump arrogance syndrome that you can't take me down. And I'm like, that's not true. Somebody was just taken down and you guys just hired him on your station. It was, I think it was.
There's a lot of that going on. We got to get ready to go to the next show and everything. By the way, Rick, you are right about the computer. You're right about the computer and everything, because apparently there was another article that just came out today that there is a computer run on living human brain cells. So there's a computer that is out there now that is literally running off of living human brain cells. So that means they're killing.
Well, in the future, you'll be able to rent your brain for, if you have a chip in your head, you can, that'll be a way to make some quick money.
There. Yeah. They take mass from frogs. They take the skin masses from frogs and put them into microchips, and they're able to replicate different kinds of things from that. So I've watched that happen unfortunately, we're at the end of the hour. Everyone, take care. Thank you for joining us on World Politics. Don't forget to watch the Russia-Ukraine show tomorrow.
So is your friend coming tomorrow on the show?
He's moving this weekend, but he said he would like to join your show. He's watched you. So, but anyway, thank you so much for joining us. Yes, we're going to have some special guests joining, tomorrow in the future, but Sasha always has guests. He always has people talking about what's really going on in this world. And you know what? Open your eyes and ears, open your mind. Don't allow just one side to brainwash you. The truth is there, I promise. Thanks for watching.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.